So very, very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, all our distinguished guests, all those who have joined us today for this very, very special IOD India's Annual Directors Conclave. This is Ritika Jhanji Jagtiani, and it is always, always a pleasure to be part of IOD's events, and especially today because this is 2021 Annual Directors Conclave. So on behalf of Institute of Directors India, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to welcome all of you to this special annual conclave, or our very esteemed and distinguished IOD members, IOD fellows, associates, and IOD India Global family. I'm told that we have our members joining us from across the time zones. We have people joining in from the USA, from UK, from Singapore, from South Africa, from UAE, and many other parts of the world. So thank you for being with us despite the time zone you are in. Let me just tell you a little bit about what we are going to be doing in the conclave today. The very theme of today's conclave is creating a future-ready board for investment and inclusive growth. So, of course, we're going to be focusing on the opportunities that lie ahead for the board of directors, but also when it comes to the challenges that they can face, especially focusing on these areas so that they can come out with better performance. The key topics that will be covered in this conclave are creating a future-ready board, diverse, socially responsible, tech-savvy, and inclusive. Corporate governance, moving beyond mere compliance. Developing a roadmap for the effectiveness of boards through independent directors. ESG strategies in the boardroom. Corporate governance in public sector enterprises. And, of course, governance strategies for state development. And not to forget, there will also be a very special launch and presentation of a survey report that we're going to be doing on the role of independent directors in addressing corporate fraud and misconduct, conducted jointly by IOD India and Deloitte Touche Tohmatsu India. A big thank you to all our partners for their overwhelming support for this very special program. I would like to start with our principal strategic partner, ACCA. Thank you so much, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. Principal partners, Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited, that's ONGC, and Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation. Moving on to our platinum partner, Delhi Tourism, Bihar Tourism. Our gold partners, World Gold Council from UK, Cisco, GAIL India Limited, India Tourism Development Corporation Limited, Jharkhand Tourism, Gokuldas Exports Limited, National Handloom Development Corporation Limited, Universal Sompo General Insurance Company Limited, Mazagaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, and National Small Industries Corporation. Moving on to our silver partners for this conclave, we would like to thank Gujarat Tourism, Indraprastha Gas Limited, Delhi State Industrial and Infrastructure Developmental Corporation, Glass Lewis, TriStar Group from UAE, National Payments Corporation of India, Madhya Pradesh Tourism, Indian Oil Corporation Limited, Mineral Exploration Corporation Limited, Chhattisgarh State Industrial Development Corporation. Moving on to the associate partners, Dahati Gold Mines Company Limited, Hindustan Copper Limited, Balmer Lowry and Company Limited, NMDC Limited, SMC Group, Mahanagar Gas Limited. And our knowledge partners, Deloitte, Global Schools Foundation from Singapore. And a very, very special thanks to our supporting partner, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India, that's ICSI. So with all that, ladies and gentlemen, underway, may I now request the President of Institute of Directors India, Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia, who's spearheading the mission and the vision of IOD, to please deliver the welcome address. Over to you, General Ahluwalia.
Thank you. Thank you, Ritika. Honorable Justice Venkatachalaya ji, former Chief Justice of India and former Chairman, National Human Rights Commission, now National Chairman, Institute of Directors. Institute of Directors, as you all know, is a not-for-profit, membership-based association of corporate directors in India, responsible for continuing training and updating of directors, all types, whether it is executive, non-executive directors, independent directors, women directors. Networking through periodic regional, national, and global conventions. 3 of them are held abroad annually, London, Dubai, and Singapore. Then we have the board research and advisory, that is the annual board evaluations, CSR impact analysis, surveys, compliance, and other related areas. We raise operational corporate functional standards through annual Golden Peacock Awards in 14 different areas. Now, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome the VVIPs and our honored guests from India and abroad. We have more than 1,000 participants from across the geographies and industries on a single virtual platform. The IOD Annual Convention is an occasion like no other. Not only it attracts a stellar cast of guest speakers, but also sets an agenda for directors, challenges for the near future. We hope to inspire business through and beyond these historic and challenging times. The key topics include creating a future-ready board, which is diverse, which is inclusive, socially responsible, technologically savvy, with effective communication, ethics, values, culture, and manages rise of stakeholder capitalism, geopolitical shifts which may affect supply and logistic chains, and the sustainability goals and ESG strategies are a more recent inclusion in our areas. The agenda of high-performing boards include diversity and inclusiveness, long-term vision, a performance analysis through non-financial indicators, not just financial reports and ratios, what drives value, including alternative strategies, technology like artificial intelligence and cloud to leverage for increased resilience. In corporate governance, we shall see what brings clarity to the role of board and independent directors to move it beyond compliance for competitive advantage. About independent directors, point is how to be really independent, how to raise standards of governance through board committees, how to be vanguard of minority shareholders and regulatory prescriptions. They rely heavily on independent directors, so there is no way but to come up to it. India's economic growth story of the last 3 decades, that is since 1991, talks about Sensex rising 36 times, market cap rising 69 times, FDIs have doubled, ease of doing business has brought us from 150 rank to near 50 now, and India to become the 3rd largest economy by around 2025, with GDP rising to US $5 trillion. Today in the evening at 6:15 p.m., we shall have a brief presentation on the joint survey report on the role of independent directors in controlling corporate frauds and corruption, our preparedness to address it. This joint survey was organized by Deloitte and IOD and will be presented by the Deloitte partner. The survey shows very clearly the rise of fraud, corruption, and cyber attacks. It is showing 6.07 lakh cyber security incidents in the first 6 months of the current year, 2021, that is from January to June, reported by the India Computer Emergency Response Team, CERT. COVID-19 and remote working have also further added complexities and vulnerabilities in the equation. Fraud is a key risk area, both for the board and the audit committees to focus on. It cannot be under wrap any longer. The digital tools and forensic data analytics have become vital now. The second day focus, that is tomorrow, will be more on state public sector enterprises, rebooting governance strategies, and new areas like ESG and sustainability would get better coverage. We have, of course, a galaxy of speakers from government, business leadership, and professionals like from the government, Girish Chandra Murmuji, Controller and Auditor General of India, Mr. Tarun Kapoorji, Ministry of Petroleum, Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Mr. Alok Tandonji, Secretary, Ministry of Mines, and Mr. Ali Raza Rizvi, Secretary, Department of Public Enterprises in Ministry of Finance. From the business, we have our old friend and well-wishers, Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, Vice Chairman, Bharti Enterprises. We have K.K. Mistriji, Vice Chairman and CEO of HDFC Limited, India. From our foreign colleagues, we have Professor Mervyn E. King, Chairman, King's Committee on Corporate Governance, Patron, Good Governance Academy, Chairman Emeritus IIRC and GRI, and the former Judge Supreme Court of South Africa. We have William Brooks, FCA, President of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, UK. We are MOU partner with them for over 10 years now. Mr. Mark Miller, President ACCA, Association of Chartered Certified Accountants of UK. We're very proud to welcome him. Sir Andrew Lickerman, Professor of Management Practice and former Dean of London Business School, UK. Very kind of him to come again to address our audience. Mr. Windy Banga, a regular speaker at our, a chairman of UK Government Investments, a senior partner of Clayton, Dubilier and Rice, and senior independent director of GlaxoSmithKline, UK. Mr. Atul Timurnikar, co-founder and executive chairman, Global Indian International, JIS, Singapore. A number of these, I have certainly not been able to address all the guests and special VVIPs who have come. I'm glad Mr. Anup Vadhavanji, who has been regularly supporting IOD, and we're very grateful to him that he has also joined. Thank you very much, Anup. I would now just take the privilege of inviting the next speaker, who is to invite the chairman of the Institute of Directors, chairman of this conclave of 2 days, Honorable Justice M.N. Venkatalaji, to deliver the chairman's address. A few words about him. All of us know him, all of you know him. The Honorable Justice M.N. Venkatalaji has been former Chief Justice of India till 1995. He was chairman of National Human Rights Commission after that. He chaired Constitution Reforms Committee, a very well-known organization which really made a lot of changes. Honored as Padma Vibhushan by the Honorable President of India. He is presently the honorary chairman of Institute of Directors India and honorary chairman of Golden Peacock Awards jury. This year, of course, we were very happy to see the release of a special biography on Justice M.N. Venkatalaia by Mr. V. Sudesh Pai. The book is called The Man and the Judge, a Venkatalaia Reader. It has a beautiful foreword by the current Chief Justice of India, Mr. Sharad Bobde, who called him not just above the top judges, but apart. He referred to him as Bhishma Pitama of Justice. So I have a great pleasure in requesting Shri Venkatalaia ji, Chairman of the Convention, to kindly address us. Justice Venkatalaia.
Esteemed General Ahluwalia and all the respected and distinguished invitees, my respectful greetings to all of you. This year's conclave holds a special meaning and a special significance. Confucius cautioned that it's dangerous to live in interesting times. But then, is it interesting to live in dangerous times? There's an ongoing ethic neutral disruptive technological revolution, we are as yet unable to fully unfold and understand the magnitude of its disruptive potential. It was predicted long ago that a moment will arrive in human affairs that technological revolution occurs when computers will become more intelligent than human beings, and our bodies, minds, and our civilization itself will be irreversibly transformed, and that digital dictatorship is not only inevitable but is imminent. This is an obvious reference to the impact of what is now talked about as big data, algorithms, blockchain technology, cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and a whole host of other innovations. It is said that whoever owns data owns the future. But then big data is itself unsorted, ethic neutral, general, undifferentiated, and amorphous entity comparable to human stem cells. But what is important is that this mass of information can be churned to yield specific indicators such as consumer patterns and consumer behavior, marketing patterns, political behavior, political preferences, and many factors related to marketing and marketing practices. Health data is yet another valuable economic information. In corporate governance, there is much anticipated intrusion. At the one end, there is an extreme and understandably alarming vision of a panicky vision at that, of a possible elimination of the entire human factor altogether in favor of and towards a complete autonomous organization run by algorithms through satellite controlled command systems beyond human interventions and reach. This is an extreme alarming picture. But then one thing is closer to reality. There will be a market redistribution between shareholder and then delegate the board with a new entity, namely artificial intelligence, operating between them. The role of the board and of the executive will increasingly be devoted to processing of information than generation of information. The shareholders' meetings will be more comprehensive, more inclusive, with increased opportunities of participation with virtual and holographic participations. Corporate enterprises and methods change with access to new global information systems. Whoever ever imagined that a large global transportation enterprise runs successfully without owning a single vehicle and according to its own claim without a single employee? There will expectedly be corporate whistleblowers. There will be expectedly corporate whistleblowers. There will be a spate of mergers and acquisitions. While corporate practices are amazingly creative about business ventures, they seem to be non-creative in their responses to the new challenges and their consequences. Twilight might suddenly turn into darkness. Some of the recent acquisitions by the young ones or the older ones indicates a new trend. Corporate world needs and deserves your advice and guidance. At this very critical stage, I wish the IOD every success in the kind of programs that it conducts, and I hope and pray that this conclave provides great guidance to the corporate world, particularly more than the economic aspects of it, how this world could be a happier and a better place for everyone to live. Thank you very much for your kindness.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for making time for this Annual Directors Conclave, and we're always very inspired by you and the words you share with us. Thank you so much once again, and thank you, General Ahluwalia, for the welcome address as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time we move on to a very, very special keynote address. And to deliver this keynote address, please join me in welcoming Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, Vice Chairman, Bharti Enterprises Limited, one of India's leading business groups and first-generation corporations with interests in areas of telecom, agri-food business, financial services, realty, communication, and media devices. Mr. Mittal, one of India's leading industrialists, is known for his invaluable contributions in business, different areas of public interest, and nation as a whole. He serves on many international bodies and think tanks and is closely associated with spearheading the Indian industry's trade, collaboration, and policy. A passionate advocate of the right to good education, he also serves on the boards of several educational institutions and has been deeply associated with the cause of education. He strongly believes that a responsible corporation has a duty to give it back to the community in which it operates. This belief has resulted in Bharti Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mittal has been associated with IOD family for over 2 decades now. He was part of the Golden Peacock Awards grand jury way back in 2000. Truly, he's led the group by example, from Bharti Cellular to Airtel, a global brand. A leading telecom company now operates in 20 countries across Asia and Africa in a short span of time. A true inspiration to our boardroom and business community. Thank you so much, Mr. Mittal, for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Ritika. Lieutenant General Ahluwalia, Justice Venkatachalaya ji, my fellow panelists on this session. Yes, indeed, I always have relished my engagement and interactions at the IOD. Of course, I have come back after a long time. I know I'm cognizant of my absence in spite of you having invited me a number of times. But all said and done, let me first of all compliment you for this the conclave, the Annual Directors Conclave, and more importantly, picking up the theme of investment and inclusive growth. As we all know, COVID-19 almost halted and in some cases reversed the gains of decades, deepened inequalities and risks. General Ahluwalia, you mentioned about stakeholder capitalism. And I think time has come when we need to actually look at more stakeholder concerns. Not only the shareholders or the employees, but also consumers and the communities we live in on the other side, with a very, very high focus on inclusive growth. This is something which this country needs. And I believe corporate India and India Inc. need to match their initiatives with what the government of India and the state governments are doing, and look at ensuring that we have inclusive growth, which can touch millions of people who need it the most. I must also say that one of the big subject which is engaging the world is on climate change. It has taken a center stage at multilateral discussions. 127 governments responsible for more than 60% of global emissions have considered commitments to net zero, while only 8% of world's largest companies, Global Fortune 500, pledged to become net zero by 2030. Of course, they are also the ones who have indeed created the imbalance in the climate. And I believe the initiative and the strategic direction which India is taking under Prime Minister Modi, it is equally the responsibility of Indian industry and corporate India to ensure that we shoulder our responsibilities and we complement the efforts towards net zero of the government of India. Also during this time, in the last 18 months, international private sector inflows for developing countries in the Sustainable Development Goals fell by 1/3 in 2020. And that is putting a lot of stress, if I must say, and pressure within. What we see today is directors the equity and symbolism of returning cash to shareholders. I think this is the dilemma which the boards are facing when employees were being laid off or furloughed in many cases. Or for that matter, companies' cash position, reserves, and strategic plans, which need to ensure that the company is risk averse, and that is the responsibility of the board and the board members, given the extreme uncertainty. I'm happy that Indian economy is coming back to its pre-pandemic level, and we expect over 9% GDP growth this year. This will be a great boost, not only for trade in India, but global trade. And I must also say that there are many companies and the boards who responded to this crisis very quickly. The directors, they stepped in on towards improving collaboration, implementing new processes, focusing on resilience, and spending more time on board work, especially with the board meetings gone virtual. So while one didn't have to travel, but different time zones put pressure on people who were up early morning or up late night, depending on the time zones they were living in. Let me move to the corporate governance best practices. And I think at the very outset, let me say, it is now moving towards beyond compliance. I think gone are the days when boards were only looking at compliances. Agile and competitive business, companies, they need board members who are very well prepared, who understand the business dynamics. And therefore, it is important that the company's board and the promoters must bring in directors on the board who can add value to the company's strategic goals, to ensure that we at the board can all give right direction to the management team for them to deliver. Also, if I may say, the corporate culture which needs to be built in a company is absolutely the responsibility of the board of directors. It is just not the chairman of the board. It falls on the shoulders of all the board members. And more importantly, can we look at creating corporate culture which gives priority to ethical standards, professionalism, integrity, and compliances, and more importantly, setting a direction for operating and strategic goals to be delivered by the management teams, as I mentioned earlier. It is equally important that we get the right independent directors. And when I say right, means it's just not the right person with the domain knowledge. They need to be people of eminence. They need to be people who have domain knowledge in their areas of strength, which every company and every board needs a direction. And equally, it is their responsibility to see that the governance is of the highest standard at the company's board level. The independent director's paramount role today is not only just voicing the concern of small investors, but more importantly, related party transactions, conflicts of interest, transparent information sharing, and compliances. I think if we put all this together, I believe that sets the tone for the company's management to ensure that there is high level of ethics and integrity within the company, and more importantly, they deliver the business in a very transparent manner, and in the manner in which the goals which the boards have set up, they can deliver those. I'm also happy that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs set up the Independent Directors Data Bank. I think that will help, especially, I would say, the medium-level companies to find the right independent directors. The dichotomy which I see is, of course, one is on the stringent rules, regulation, and compliances, and therefore, what we see is many of the persons, they don't want to get into an independent director role with a company which is not ethical, which is not looking at the responsibility which they need to deliver, not only for the businesses which they are in, but more importantly, outside for the communities and the inclusive growth. And therefore, it becomes all the more important for the promoters, the shareholders, to ensure that they provide absolutely highest corporate governance within their companies. Need for women representation on the boards. I think that is something which is now engaging all the boards to have more diversity. And I think diversity, we need to look at just not, if I may say, women board members, but we can also look at bringing young talent, young entrepreneurs. I mean, today we see entrepreneurs who are becoming unicorns in their own right in the startups and in the new age companies. And I'm sure they bring a different set of ideas to the board. Let me also talk about the ESG and stakeholder governance. I think this is again something where, especially the listed companies, they need to ensure that they are not only mapping the ESG risks and opportunities, but more importantly, ensuring that adequate reporting and monitoring happens and integrate those ESG consideration into executive decision making. Because this will ultimately depend and impact on the company's businesses, especially the companies who are doing global business globally. In this, let me share what we have done at Bharti and Airtel. Airtel has committed to 50% reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions by financial year 31 across all its operations. We have also committed alignment with SBTi's business ambition for 1.5 degrees centigrade pathway to build a sustainable planet. And I'm also happy to share with each one of you, Airtel is also the first Indian company to join the UN Global Compact. And all this comes on the back of the highest corporate governance. Airtel is perceived, and Bharti Enterprises across all its businesses is seen amongst the highest corporate governed companies within India, and at par with any multinational companies we see all over the world. Bharti Airtel also has received Best Governed Company awards in the past. And more importantly, I think the performance across the ESG pillars, on the environment side, 49% reduction in networking emission intensity. On governance, we have 82% non-executive directors on the board, enhanced sustainability reporting, strengthened disclosures, and business responsibility reports. While these are mandated, but I think it's the quality of the work and the governance process which I'm very, very proud of at Bharti. Let me quickly now move to the CSR. That was another area which I was supposed to talk about. The COVID-led last 15-18 months has seen a significant shift on spends on the COVID-19 CSR activities. 80% of annual CSR budgets were allocated to pandemic last year. Therefore, the other areas which needed more attention took a backseat. But I must say that business going forward cannot continue on as usual basis, business as usual basis. We are seeing increasing social inequality, mass extinction of animals, disruption of entire ecosystem, and which are already threats to our existence, the existence of mankind. We see the pollution levels, we see temperatures rising. So all this is man-made problems, and therefore I think it is imperative that all of us need to pitch in. On the business responsibility of Bharti Airtel, we are governed by 9 principles. Ethics, I talked about, transparency and accountability, product lifecycle sustainability, employees' well-being, stakeholder engagement, protection of environment, responsible policy advocacy. I think this is something which every business must understand. It is important that we need to be responsibly talking about any policy advocacy initiatives or engagement with various governments. And I would say in the last piece, supporting the inclusive growth. What has Bharti done on these efforts? We took education as one of the pillars to move forward way back in 2000 when Bharti Foundation was set up. I'm extremely happy to share that today our initiatives are spanning across 16 states and union territories in India. We are focusing on the underprivileged children and on the girl child. And I'm happy to share that 16 states and UTs, we are reaching out to almost 290,000 students every morning. This includes 180 of the Satya Bharati schools, which are set up in the villages in rural India across 6 states, 40,000 children with 50% girl students, and the 800 government schools where we are engaged on a quality support program. And all this education is being given absolutely free of charge. We don't charge even a single rupee. The midday meal, the uniforms, the nutrition level, everything is being taken care of by Bharati Foundation. And since inception, about 4.5 lakh students have been part of the Satya Bharati journey. Coinciding with Prime Minister's Swachh Bharat Abhiyan in 2014, we announced the Satya Bharati Abhiyan, and I'm happy to share that we built 32,000 toilets in village homes in Ludhiana, rural across 1,000 villages, and Amritsar, about 700 villages, to ensure that those rural Amritsar and rural Ludhiana became defecation-free, ODF-free. 32,000 toilets and with about 225,000 beneficiaries. And I'm happy to report that those toilets, even today, 98.5% of those are being used as toilets. This is the best benchmark in the country. And that is because we did a lot of, if I may say, I brought these school kids, the Satya Bharati school children of Punjab in Ludhiana, onto the streets of villages to impress upon their parents and communities to have a toilet at home who were resisting. And it is so gratifying when we see them, when we see women talking about that they have got their dignity back, when we see more children are healthy now because the illnesses have come down. And in addition to that, we spent about 100 crores towards the COVID activities, including the PM CARES Fund, and 270 crore benefit was given to 55 million low-income customers to tide over during the pandemic. So these are the activities which we did on the CSR side. And I believe it is important that it is, and not important, I think it is imperative for each one of us to give back to societies. It is our responsibility. It's not an obligation to ensure that we reach the last person standing and handhold them. So in the end, I can say boards need to focus on accountability. They need to realize corporate growth strategy with net zero. They need to adapt operating models for transforming businesses, creating long-term value, leading diversity, investing in innovation, but more importantly, being transparent and completely engaged with all stakeholders and looking at just not equity, but inclusive growth. So I'm happy to be here, and I'm sure this conclave will come out with many more insights and, if I may say, learnings for each one of us. I wish this conclave all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mittal. It was really inspiring hearing you and the kind of examples you shared for Bharti Enterprises. I'm sure there's a lot to learn from all the board of directors who are joining you from different parts of the world. Thank you so much again for sparing time, and we hope to see you sooner this time again at IOD. Thank you so much.
Certainly. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to move on to the next keynote address. Please join me in welcoming Mr. KK Mistry, Vice Chairman and Chief Executive Officer, HDFC Limited, India's leading housing finance company. We all know that today HDFC has played an incredible role and has brought a silent revolution in the whole housing sector. Mr. Mistry brings with him over 3 decades of weighted work experience in banking and financial sectors domain. He has played a critical role in HDFC's successful transformation into India's leading financial services conglomerate by facilitating the formation of companies including HDFC Bank, HDFC Asset Management Company, HDFC Life Insurance Company, and HDFC Ergo General Insurance Company. A chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, he began his career in 1975. He serves on multiple boards and is also on the advisory board of a few Indian corporates. A very hearty welcome to you, Mr. Mistry. I think there was some.
We can't hear Keki.
Yeah. So I think you need to unmute yourself.
He's unmuted. I think there's something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you now.
Can you
We
hear
can
me
hear
now?
you. Yes, sir. We can hear you now. We can.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. We can hear you. Yes, sir. We can hear you. We can hear you.
So let me, first of all, a very good afternoon to all of you. I would like to thank the Institute of Directors for inviting me to speak at this conclave. I appreciate the significant contribution made by IOD towards supporting and recognizing the corporate governance efforts by Indian companies and for being a pioneer in bringing together effective boardroom best practices from all over the world. Corporate governance is often looked upon as a means to measure how well a company is run. Investors use corporate governance as an indicator to judge the quality of a company's management and the effectiveness of its board. It is now widely accepted by companies that sound principles of governance are a necessary tool for their long-term development and sustainability. It is important to recognize here that each country has to evolve governance norms that culturally best suit them. In this regard, several Indian companies have tried to imbibe international best practices in corporate governance. Corporate governance in India is unique in the sense that Indian companies are divided into various categories, each with their own characteristics. There are four broad types of companies in India, namely, one is family-owned or promoter-controlled enterprises, two is public sector enterprises, three is multinationals, and four is private sector companies that are neither family-owned nor do they have a dominant promoter. Each of these boards have their own set of issues and challenges. Hence, best practices in corporate governance need to address all these issues. I would like to emphasize here that many Indian companies have done very well over the years in terms of maintaining governance standards. Also, many of these have done so voluntarily, driven by their own internal policies and the desire to do the right thing. There is recognition in India that companies committed to good governance have a distinct competitive advantage along with enhanced reputation and investor trust. Global investors are extremely cautious in identifying the companies where they invest. One of their main focus areas is good governance. These investors are willing to pay a premium to companies where governance practices are perceived to be strong. No doubt in India, we have had our share of corporate governance setbacks over the last decade. However, there are also several examples of leading corporate houses that have stood the test of time, created wealth, diversified their businesses, haven't compromised on their core values, and have preserved a culture of accountability. I would like to talk about 8 corporate governance trends that have got a lot of traction in India in recent years. The first is risk management. The pandemic has confirmed that unexpected disasters can indeed occur. Having come through this past year, boards and their senior leaders need to assess if their organization's crisis management plans were up to the challenges they faced. Going forward, organizations may need to develop a readjusted risk management framework. Risk management is about preparing for an uncertain future. One of the current uncertainties is assessing how many of the various challenges that boards have experienced during the past year will prove to be permanent. After the pandemic, key considerations for the board will be cybersecurity, data protection, and legal compliances. The crisis has shown that the need for long-term strategic thinking cannot be overemphasized. Boards that have a long-term view have always been able to help their organizations emerge stronger after every crisis. During the pandemic, boards without a holistic view of forward-looking fiscal scenarios were taken by surprise when the tide turned so dramatically. The age-old saying that the best risk management framework is one that fortifies the balance sheet in good times so as to create sufficient ammunition to tackle a downturn held true during the pandemic. The second theme is the importance of independent directors. More is expected of today's independent directors than ever before, as the business landscape has become far more complex. Boards are having to deal with complex issues such as economic uncertainty, market volatility, ESG issues, rapid changes in technology, cybersecurity issues, investor activism, and regulatory and media scrutiny. A board can operate at an optimum level only if it has truly independent members. The difference between a good board and a great one is the quality of the directors sitting around the table. Independent directors carry a unique responsibility of being a conduit between the various stakeholders and the management of a company. In other words, they are the gatekeepers of compliance and governance. As the responsibilities placed on independent directors has been gradually increasing over the years, the regulators need to be commended for agreeing to include stock options as part of the compensation that can be paid to independent directors within the overall limit prescribed under the Companies Act. The third issue revolves around shareholder activism. Shareholder activism will gather momentum as organizations look towards a post-pandemic future. Globally last year, activism had slowed down considerably as many activists were preoccupied with their own survival. Also, it became difficult for activists to garner public support as there was an understandable leeway towards companies during the height of the crisis. However, as the threat of the pandemic abates, boards will need to be prepared to deal with activism, proxy fights, takeovers, and M&As. We have already started seeing several signs of shareholder activism in recent times. In Western countries, some activist funds are increasingly being aggressive and in certain instances threatening corporates with proxy fights if they don't get what they want. Shareholder activism in India is likely to become even more pronounced in the years to come. Companies will need to ensure that their corporate governance standards are frequently evaluated and strictly followed to prevent activists from exploiting weaknesses or inconsistencies. Further, constant communication with the investors will be vital in maintaining shareholder confidence. The fourth area is the growing focus on ESG. Increasingly, some investors and proxy advisors are actively monitoring board oversight and responsiveness to ESG factors and comparing the company's ESG performance to that of its peers. The ESG ecosystem continues to evolve, and recent market-driven and regulatory developments are accelerating standardized ESG reporting and impacting shareholder expectations. Corporations in India are beginning to publish ESG reports. In fact, some Indian companies have published their first business responsibility and sustainability report this financial year on a voluntary basis, even though it was made mandatory by SEBI only for financial year 2023. As the expectations from boards on what they are doing for ESG continues to evolve, directors should work with management to identify the material ESG risks and opportunities faced by the company and work to integrate these considerations into the organization's strategic and operational decision-making. Further, directors and management should engage with investors to understand their perspectives and priorities with regard to ESG. The fifth theme I would like to talk about is the rising expectations of the board. In today's scenario, boards have to keep pace with continuous technological disruptions such as cybersecurity, digital transformation, and a whole host of other issues. They are expected to advise the management on how to cope up with changing times. Investors are pushing boards to provide a better insight into the relevance of a director's skill sets to the company. Many institutional investors are asking companies for greater disclosure around the competencies of the board and a clearer, more direct link to each director's skill sets. Indian boards have begun disclosing a competency matrix of their board of directors in the annual report to ensure greater transparency. Without doubt, board composition and performance are pertinent and important topics for investors and external stakeholders. Boards will need to evaluate how their board composition reflects the stakeholder base and ensure that its members possess the appropriate competencies needed to oversee strategic opportunities and risks. The sixth theme I would like to talk about is diversity. Investors also want to see greater diversity in the composition of boards, whether it is in terms of diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, or skills. Diversity in particular has in recent times become a big focus area for investors who want to see an increased diversity of thought and experience to better enable the board to identify risks and improve all-round performance. The percentage of women on boards in India has increased from about 6% in 2014 to over 17% in 2020. In fact, according to a survey by MSCI, Indian boards have fared better than some of their market peers in ensuring gender parity. In comparison to our 17%, women constituted 13% of boards in China, 10% in Russia, 9% in Mexico, and 14% in Brazil. However, we lag UK and US, where nearly a third of the board members of leading companies are women. In Western countries, there are a few examples where shareholders seeking to promote diversity have turned to litigation by accusing non-compliant boards of violating their fiduciary duties by failing to bring in gender or racial diversity on the boards. The seventh theme I would like to talk about is board effectiveness. Going forward, there will be heightened focus on board effectiveness. Directors are having to consider an increasingly broad range of issues. There is increasing pressure on boards to limit the number of external mandates a director can take so as to get a greater degree of commitment from the director. In the course of time, directors will be forced to join fewer boards. Currently in India, the maximum number of directorship has been capped at 7. In developed countries, however, investors tend to expect a maximum of 4 or 5 directorships. Boards are striving to improve the quality of their board evaluation criteria and are developing approaches to engage with investors on board effectiveness. Regular board evaluation needs to be embraced by organizations. The eighth theme I want to talk about is on virtual board meetings. In view of the continued virtual board meetings, board members have realized that business can be handled effectively via such meetings. Virtual meetings have made it possible for directors to use their time more efficiently, reduce traveling time, and yet attain the same degree of effectiveness. Boards need to be constantly trained on the risks associated with increased cybersecurity and privacy issues, especially if meetings are being held virtually. Post the pandemic, when travel and in-person meetings resume, the nomination committee will have to determine if the number of in-person board and committee meetings should be reduced and instead some of them supplemented by virtual meetings. In conclusion, let me say that the bar continues to rise for Indian boards. India Inc. is proceeding on the right path in establishing best practices in governance. At the same time, governance in India has a unique flavor, and I do believe that both SEBI and MCA are taking this into consideration while framing new laws and regulations. Commitment to good governance leads to a distinctive competitive advantage, enhances reputation, and creates long-term sustainability. Organizations need to focus on prudence and long-term growth, irrespective of economic cycles. I'm confident that corporate governance practices in India will keep improving, which will enable easier access to capital from global markets and greater transparency. Thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mistry, for making time out from your busy schedule and joining us for this Annual Directors Conclave, and so in detail, elaborately outlining the challenges, the opportunities that lie ahead of the Board of Directors. Thank you so much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Anup Vadhavan, retired IAS, former Secretary, Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, Government of India, who shall be delivering the next keynote address. Mr. Anup brings with him a wealth of experience in transformational leadership, served in various roles at Department of Commerce, Directorate General of Foreign Trade, Department of Financial Services, Department of Economic Affairs, and Prime Minister's Office of India. We are honored to have him among us. He'll be sharing his insights and wisdoms as we prepare for a more sustainable future. A very, very warm welcome to you, Dr. Anup Vadhavan. Thank you so much for making time for this conclave.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the very kind introduction. Good afternoon to everyone. As always, I'm delighted to be amidst a very, very distinguished group of participants at this very important event on creating a future-ready board for investment and inclusive growth. I think it is undisputed that readiness for investment and inclusive growth is a most prudent and critical orientation to be targeted for corporate boards. Investment and growth are major objectives and challenges for the economy and for the policymaker and the government. And fortunately, they are equally important objectives for corporations, along with, of course, the profitability resulting from sound investments and the resulting growth. There is clearly no apparent conflict between the interests of the policymaker and the corporations with regard to pursuing investment and growth as objectives. And in this context, it is particularly important to create the right sentiment, optimism, and positivity in the industry to encourage industry to marshal their efforts in this logical direction of growth and investment in their own self-interest and in the interest of their financial success, and of course, in the national interest. To bridge any gap in the perception that policymakers and government and industry may have in terms of the desirability of the investment climate, in terms of the receptivity of the investment environment for these objectives to be pursued, it is important that the right framework is created, the right engagement is created for addressing any shortcomings that might be there in the policy and regulatory environment, in further promoting ease of doing business in the approvals, compliances, and operating environment. Much progress has been made in improving ease of doing business, but there might still be areas which need to be addressed. There might be a difference in perception in terms of what the policymaker may feel and what the industry actually experiences. There is also need for providing a state-of-the-art, plug-and-play physical environment, a land-based physical environment with state-of-the-art infrastructure, utilities, logistics, with a decentralized, single window for investment approvals, for implementation of projects, for actual operations. There needs to be a decentralized single window associated with a land-based platform. I think the SEZ program was an effort to create that land-based platform with a decentralized single window under the Development Commissioner. And that is one area where I think much ground needs to be covered still. In terms of the ease of doing business aspect, in terms of ease of giving approvals, much has been achieved. But the physical environment related to land, labor, power, water, infrastructure, that needs to be brought up to global standards. But ultimately, as an investment destination, we are competing with the whole world. And I think it's important that all these efforts happen in a participative manner between government and industry. So very often, a top-down or top-driven effort at reform, however well-intentioned it might be, might fall short of the aspirations of industry, might fall short of the perception of industry in achieving the intended outcome. There is no dispute that both policymakers, government, and industry have the same objective in mind. But ultimately, if the efforts are participative, collaborative, if decisions are taken in consultation with each other, then the outcomes will actually materialize, and whatever gaps that may have been there in our investment environment that might still be persisting would get addressed. So let me now come to the aspect of inclusivity. There is no contradiction on the aspect of investment and growth as far as government and industry are concerned. On the aspect of inclusiveness, at the outset, there might prima facie seem to be a lack of commonality in it being a priority, between government and industry. However, if we look closely and if we go by the remarks made by my very distinguished preceding speakers, this inclusiveness is an equally important goal for industry as it is for the government in the interest of long-term sustainability. Inclusivity in various practices is important for social acceptance of corporations. It is important for smooth labor relations. It's important for a healthy market, healthy demand over time. Lack of inclusiveness, lack of taking care of these critical interests, whether of your consumer or labor or your management staff, or the social environment around you, will undermine the long-term sustainability of businesses. So I think inclusiveness is an equally important goal to be pursued for industry as it is for policymakers and government. Of course, inclusiveness is mandated partly in law. If you look at various laws by which companies comply, inclusiveness and equity are mandated, whether it is the CSR provisions, whether all the labor legislations, whether it is some equity related laws on remunerations, whether it is directors benefits, directors accountability. All these mandated measures are aimed at promoting inclusiveness, aimed at promoting equity. However, I think we need to create consciousness that goes beyond mere compliance with laws. We need to create consciousness on the part of industry to have inclusiveness as an aspect of every initiative of theirs, regardless of whether there's a legal mandate or not. And this is what separates, good, successful, well-reputed companies from those that are not so successful, the ordinary companies, or those which do not have the same kind of reputation as the leaders in this field. I don't want to name any companies, but if we look at the industrial scenario, some companies will stand out in terms of their emphasis on inclusiveness, emphasis on equity, their social consciousness in doing business. And I think that is the culture we need to create within our boards, that do it as in the self-interest of business, not as a charitable act or as a mandatory compliance of laws, but in the own self-interest of the long-term sustainability of business. And I think these values of inclusiveness and equity are the logical orientation of a professional value-driven company. If you look at a professional value-driven company, they logically include these aspects in their way of working, whether it is concern for the customer, whether it's concern for labor or the social obligations in the surroundings in which they operate. I think IOD can play a major role in bringing government and corporate boards together and bridging any perception gaps on the attractiveness of the Indian investment environment, and in creating the desired orientation towards inclusiveness in the interest of sustainability. I think if we look at recent example of many countries, for instance, the US, excessive inequity, excessive pursuit of profitability is not sustainable for the country and for the industry. And I think if you look at recent developments in the US, recent developments in US politics, that's a lesson which clearly comes out. I think in terms of what IOD and all of us can do, at present there is a lot of emphasis on capacity building of directors in discharging their fiduciary responsibilities. There's a lot of concern about compliance with laws, compliance with mandatory obligations. And the focus is more on that, on training directors to discharge their fiduciary responsibilities. I think we can extend that orientation, and in our guidance literature, in our training literature, we can include guidance on investment and growth as key objectives. We can include guidance on inclusiveness while pursuing guidance and growth. And we can do this by appealing to the self-interest of businesses, showing this to be in the self-interest of businesses rather than the sometimes elusive better side of the human being or the charitable side of the human being. We need to realize that this is the self-interest not only of business but also of the nation as a whole. So let me conclude my remarks by thanking the Institute of Directors and Justice Venkat Chalaya, General Ahluwalia, and Mr. Ashok Kapoor in particular for making my participation possible. It was delightful to share my thoughts and views, and I'm confident that with this orientation towards investment and growth while taking care of inclusiveness, we'll achieve very, very fruitful and meaningful outcomes in the future. So my sincere thanks. Thank you. Thank you to everyone.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anup Wadhawan. It's always an honor to have you, sir. And thank you so much for continuing to guide IOD towards its initiatives. Thank you very much, sir, again, for making time for this conclave. And now, ladies and
sorry
gentlemen.
to interject, I'm going to take leave. I have another meeting.
Okay, sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. All right, as we move forward with the agenda of the conclave, before that, I would like to thank almost 700 of you. I'm told there are about 690 people who've joined us from all over the world, from across time zones who are with me right now. Thank you so much for joining us for this annual conclave. Please stay with us because we have many more insightful addresses coming up ahead. Moving ahead, Mr. Tarun Kapoor, Secretary, Ministry of Petrol and Natural Gas, Government of India, was to actually join us for a keynote address, but he's just been called in by the Minister for a very important meeting. So we cannot have him with us right now, but we hope to have him sometime later. And if he gets free with the meeting, then we can have him maybe later in the day. But for now, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to welcome our guest of honor, Honorable Comptroller and Auditor General of India, Mr. Girish Chandra Murmu. Please join me in extending a very, very warm welcome to him. Mr. Murmu, a 1985 batch IAS officer of Gujarat cadre, and he's our first Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir before he was sworn in as the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. In his more than 3 decades of distinguished service, he's held many important assignments in Government of India and in Government's office cadre. We are very honored and very privileged to have the Honorable CAG among us today to deliver the Guest of Honor address. A very warm welcome to you, Mr. Girish Chandra Murmu.
Okay. Honorable Justice Eminent Venkat Chalaya, National Chairman of Institute of Directors, Lieutenant General J.S. Ahluwalia, the President, Institute of Directors India, Mr. Rakesh Bharti Mittal, Vice Chairman, Bharti Enterprises, Mr. K.K.M. Mistry, Vice Chairman and CEO of HDFC Limited, Dr. Anup Wadhawan, my friend and my colleague, former Secretary, Department of Commerce. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my profound pleasure to take part in the virtual global webinar organized by the Institute of Directors on the theme Governance Strategies for State Development. There are difficult times as we are impacted by the pandemic, but extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. So it is a comment on your prompt adaptability that the event is taking off on a virtual mode. These are qualities absolutely needed to engage effectively with our stakeholders, especially for something as vital as governance. At the core of governance is about capacity building and enhancement and creating a range of opportunities. There has been realization about this among the wise men who led the nation at the onset. In fact, it was at the stroke of midnight on August 14, 1947, that the vision for governance was laid out. No, it was not the more famous Rise to Destiny speech, but it was a few lines from what Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, our first Vice President and a great visionary and statesman, said, I quote, "We should develop competence and ability which would help us to utilize the opportunities which are now open to us from tomorrow morning. From midnight today, we cannot throw the blame on Britishers. We have to assume the responsibility ourselves for what we do. A free India will be judged by the way in which it will serve the interest of the common man in the matter of food, clothing, shelter, and social services, unquote. The path of overall development and sustained progress of nation is dependent on effective administration. Effective administration is a function of good governance. So how do you usher in good governance? There are many dimensions and elements. Primarily, it is the step that is responsible for creating a conducive political, legal, and economic environment for building individual capabilities and encouraging private initiative. Of course, all stakeholders have to be on board. There is a realization and broad enthusiasm on the need to undertake the reforms and devise appropriate strategies. There has to be appropriate devolution, decentralization, delegation of power at the requisite levels. And over time, people's participation has to be systematically and organically enhanced. Of much importance is planning and implementing governance are transparency, accountability, and efficiency related to its effective monitoring and evaluation, where e-governance and IT applications and tools have big role to play. This will lead to greater transparency, fair play, and make system faster and user-friendly. These are continuous process that will keep on evolving over time. Then there are other aspects like systemic and professional program, project formulation, project-based reform, link plan support, synergy and coordination between different government departments and agencies, rationalization of various schemes with periodic evaluation and measuring the outcome. With good governance as the most effective means of ensuring all-round, inclusive, sustained growth in all aspects of the life of the citizen, the environment of the society, and the ecology of the country, a vital part is the established architecture of the check and balance system in our system or representative democracy. In this system, distinct roles are envisaged for the legislature, the executive, and judiciary, and in doing so, they also provide for essential check and balances on each other to ensure that the elements of objectivity and accountability are embedded in the administration. The feature of good governance that are universally accepted include the exercise of legitimate political power, formulation and implementation of policies and programs that are equitable, transparent, socially sensitive, participatory, and above all, accountable to the people at large. There could, however, be aspects of governance that are contextually driven and geared to address the local concerns. Accountability in public spending is of such critical concern, not only because there is an element of compulsion involved in raising the government's resources through taxation, but also to ensure optimization in terms of economy, efficiency, effectiveness, usage of scarce resources. The Parliament needs to be informed how monies which were approved by them have also been expended. And in this, it is the government auditor or the CAG who provides the critical link between the executive and the Parliament by subjecting the operations of the government to regular independent investigation and review, thereby ensuring the oversight of the Parliament. While administration is the expending agency of governmental resources, audit is the validation agency to provide comfort to the government and Parliament. The audit and executive are on the same side of the table. There is no we or they relationship between them. Their goals are common. Ensuring compliance, validation, legality, transparency, competence, and effectiveness of execution of plans and programs not only enables legislature to hold the executive accountable, but also ensure good governance, balanced development, and growth. Effective governance envisages continuous efforts to tackle the disparity and skewed character of development challenges across various regions, states, and the village of India. Issues like suboptimal management of economies, persistent fiscal imprudence, disparities in the pace and level of development across regions and across the districts. The existence of significant number of voiceless poor with little opportunities for participating even in institutions of local self-government, despite visible movement towards devolution through the Panchayat Raj institution, is also indicative of deficiency in governance, as is the deterioration of physical environment, very often in urban areas. Further, a way ahead in identifying and locating the deficiencies would perhaps be a careful analysis of why some areas have succeeded in turning around the institutional capacities to govern effectively, while others have lagged behind. To conclude, it is good governance that leads to all-round achievement of national priorities and general well-being. It is the lack of good governance that is at the root of immense disappointment, which is caused by missed opportunities. I am pleased to know that Institute of Directors has curated an interesting array of topics for 6 keynote sessions. I am sure the distinguished panelists would share their experience and insight to take this discussion for higher quality engagement. Thanks and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you so much, Honorable CAG, for your erudite address and also honoring us with your gracious presence. But before we let you go, may I please request you to release the set of IOD handbooks for directors? IOD publication of a number of professional books, handbooks and periodicals like Director Today to keep the directors and boardroom community updated. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Murmu, for gracing us with your presence and sharing the insights that you did. Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is going to be at 1 p.m. But before we go into that, we have, of course, our partners to thank for who keep continuing their support to make various IOD's initiatives successful. And I would like to start thanking with the principal strategic partner for the conclave, that's ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, and principal partner Oil and Natural Gas Corporation Limited, Maharashtra Industrial Corporation Limited, our platinum partner Delhi Tourism, Bihar Tourism, and our gold partners World Gold Council from UK, Cisco, Gale India Limited, India Tourism Development Corporation Limited, Jharkhand Tourism, Gokuldas Exports Limited, National Handloom Development Corporation Limited, Universal Somport General Insurance Company Limited, Mazagaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, and National Small Industries Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the next session, which is scheduled for in a few minutes from now, let's take a look at a few of our sponsor videos.
The future moves faster than it used to. The speed of innovation in the digital age puts businesses at risk of falling behind. But it's these challenges that excite ACCA and its members. For us, the future means opportunity. We're the home of future-ready talent, creating trusted finance professionals to safeguard and future-proof your business. In a fast-moving world, our leading research, qualifications, training, and recruitment tools can give your organization a competitive edge. But what does future-proofing look like? How does working with ACCA benefit your business? The letters ACCA represent the world's leading finance qualification. They're letters you can trust. Our competency framework enables businesses to better understand the financial opportunities and challenges of their sector. Our CPD keeps your finance professionals at the forefront of knowledge, so you'll always be ahead of the curve. Find the future-ready talent you need to drive your business forward. With the world's largest specialist finance and accountancy job board, over 500,000 ACCA professionals and students ready to help expand your business. Powered by our unique global network, our cutting-edge research program provides vital insight to make the right calls. We're ready for tomorrow to help businesses succeed and improve systems that change lives and safeguard environments to be a force for good. ACCA is ready for the future. Are you?
अंधियारा मिटाने का, हमें है हौसला नई उमंग बनाने का, हमें है एक जोश हर मंजिल पाने का, हमें है एक जज्बा हर जिंदगी सजाने का, हमें है जोश हर मंजिल को पाने का, हमें है एक वादा एक सुनहरा कल बनाने का, हम हैं जिंदगी, हम हैं हर खुशी,
हम है वो रोशनी जो बनाए आपका भविष्य और उज्जवल। हम हैं ONGC।
They say that if you're an entrepreneur, manufacturer, or an industrialist, and you've an idea that you believe in, you come to Maharashtra and Maharashtra only to make it a success. And they're right. Located in the western part of India, Maharashtra has long been known as the industrial powerhouse of India, and rightly so. Owing to its large size, population, its smooth connectivity over road, rail and air, and a coastline that extends up to 720 kilometers, Maharashtra is a natural first choice of the investors. While the finest infrastructure, quality trained manpower and a conducive business environment deliver more than what's expected. Maharashtra has led the country's industrial ecosystem by continuing to attract the largest and the most diverse investments, both domestic and foreign. Be it engineering, automobiles, auto components, chemicals, drugs, pharmaceuticals, textiles, information technology or biotechnology. You name a sector, conventional or emerging, and the state would have proven itself to be a production and export giant in that sector. Besides its friendly industrial policy and the package scheme of incentives, the state also has industrial policies specially dedicated to electronics, IT and ITES, electrical vehicle, food processing, textiles, aerospace and defense, logistics and fintech. No wonder Maharashtra has the largest economy in India, contributing the most to the country's GDP growth. And the engine that makes all of these processes run smoothly and efficiently in Maharashtra is the Maharashtra Industrial Development Corporation, also known as the MIDC. Acquisition and disposal of land, provision of infrastructure facilities, and provision of support and services to entrepreneurs to start industries are the key activities that the MIDC does to spearhead the industrial growth of the state. Its initiatives under Magnetic Maharashtra 2.0 include the plug-and-play infrastructure, which means those building and set-up worries are gone for good. There's Maha Jobs for all the skilled manpower you need, spread across 17 sectors and over 950 job roles. Investor First programs, country desks, relationship managers, and relationship executives for all the hand-holding you might need. And the state initiative of Mahaparvana will grant your business the required clearance in a maximum of 48 hours. MIDC, the state-run investment promotion agency and India's finest, is truly, in today's times, the one-stop between your idea and eventual success. The state also owns the largest industrial land bank in the country, with lakhs of acres of land at their disposal. Take a closer look at Aurangabad Industrial City, or AURIC for example. Spread over 10,000 acres across Shendra and Birkin, it is being developed as one of India's first greenfield smart industrial cities. Filled with amenities, advantages and opportunities, AURIC has fast become one of the most lucrative destinations for businesses all over. The proposed bulk drug park in Raigad, electronic manufacturing cluster at Ranjangaon, high-tech engineering city at Mangaon, textile clusters in Amravati, Malegaon and Navapur, defense and aerospace cluster in Pune, Nashik and Nagpur. These stories of success are written all over Maharashtra, a land of opportunities to grow and expand your business with maximum ease and comfort. And it's only possible because the state of Maharashtra believes in development, in progress and keeps itself and its people ready for the future. Magnetic Maharashtra. It's made for business.
Delhi. Nothing stands in comparison. Every morning here brings in a deluge of hope, and every day makes sure that those dreams turn true. bringing you the best of the best that a 5,000-year-old civilization has on offer. The great melting pot of the plethora of cultures that identify India, that define the meaning of Indian hospitality. Emotional, addictive, all-embracing, a city that makes you belong. An exotic space that also makes you feel at home. Monuments that keep you gazing in wonder, where every stone is cast in timelessness, where every contour speaks out the parables of a glorious past, where time stands still, for you, with you. A city that prefers to be in shape, where every avenue leads to a future of aspirations, and every street corner opens up a surprise that enchants and reassures your faith, and every road defines a dream. Delhi, a city going places, a city that will take you places effortlessly. Be it on secure, speedy and state-of-the-art metro rails, will keep you enchanted with its indomitable spirit of life and living, through making you belong in festivals of hope. We are ready when you are.
अब तो बताओ ना, what are we celebrating?
Anu.
Oh, thank you.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Hello. Yes, sir. Oh, that's great news. Definitely, sir. I'll send it across. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Kunal, not now, yaar. You know, with your startup and all, it's...
I know. I just got the call. Investor approval मिल गया.
What?
Yes. Kashi call dinner के पहले आ जाता यार. Before I asked you this, will you be my business partner?
Opening offer तो बहुत अच्छा है. बोनस तो मिलेगा ना?
Every moment that makes you you deserves to be celebrated with gold.
You are gold.
There's a world where every one of us is connected. Everyone. Everywhere. Where everyone is included. Where everyone has access to information, education, opportunity.
There's so much out there. I'm going.
There's a world where buildings are smarter, where automation fuels productivity. And our planet's health is as important as our own. There's a world where everyone is invited to participate, to contribute, to be bold. When everyone and everything is connected,
that's really beautiful.
Anything is possible.
Good morning.
Cisco, the bridge to possible.
Gokuldas Exports. We are an organization built around our people. Our driving force is their growth, their happiness, and their empowerment. We are one of the largest manufacturers and exporters of apparels in India. Our journey began in 1985 with a vision to be a globally reputed apparel manufacturer. Our brand has been built on the foundation of quality products, state-of-the-art processes, and a team of highly motivated people. Today, with 22 state-of-the-art manufacturing units, 13,000 plus advanced machines, and a workforce of over 23,000 committed people, 85% of them being women, we are proud to produce 40 million quality garments every year. The trust we have built with our customers is at the heart of our success. We cater to all leading brands around the globe, across a range of products, from lifestyle to sportswear and fashion garments. We bring countless designs to life every day. To our customers, we are more than just a brand. We are partners who grow with them, which is why we have spent years creating a robust ecosystem capable of providing end-to-end solutions to cater to our customers' needs. We have established strategic alliances to ensure seamless supply of fabrics. Our promise of end-to-end solutions is reflected in the support that our team of world-class designers offer. Over the years, innovation has become an integral part of our journey. We have a fully designed R&D facility that enables fabric innovation development. Quality is the backbone of our business. The raw materials we source are put through rigorous quality checks before they enter the manufacturing stage. We use world-class machines for our manufacturing, sometimes customizing the process to the specific requirements of our customers. We have also incorporated value-added services to fulfill our promise of end-to-end solutions to our customers. We ensure that any garment that we pack and deliver is of a quality that our customers will be proud to pack for their own customers. At Gokuldas, we believe in delivering quality with compliance. We therefore understand the importance of keeping abreast with the latest industry standards. Our processes and facilities have been recognized by major certifications and accreditations from industry bodies and customers alike. As an organization, we understand our responsibility towards the environment, and we welcome this responsibility. Our many initiatives are focused towards doing our bit to sustain the environment. Today, our values, our quality of service, and our consistent performance has forged lasting associations with our customers and won us international recognition through numerous awards and accolades. With a strong foundation of success, credibility, and network, we are moving towards a bigger, brighter tomorrow. Our belief in the thought of no limits has been inculcated throughout the organization, be it product, performance, processes, or people. We are now ready to deliver beyond excellence.
Hello? Hello?
Good morning, sir. How are you, sir?
We can hear you,
All right,
sir.
and you?
Good morning, sir. Welcome.
I'm sorry. They were working on the Wi-Fi in the building. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Absolutely fine, sir. Please.
But I think was almost dead on time.
Very much, please.
Yes, sir, you are on time. You're absolutely on time. It gives us immense pleasure, sir, to actually welcome you. You are really one distinguished guest, and I would just like to take just a few seconds to introduce you to our distinguished guests who are here with us, joining us. And our speaker right now is joining us from South Africa, Professor Judge Mervyn E. King, SC, Chairman, King Committee on Corporate Governance, Patron, Good Governance Academy, Chair Emeritus, IIRC and GRI, and former Judge, Supreme Court of South Africa. A committed South African, dedicated campaigner for justice and fairness, an accessible and selfless man, Professor Judge King has changed the corporate governance landscape not only in South Africa, but also internationally. I'm pleased to inform you that Professor Judge King was conferred the Golden Peacock Global Award for Lifetime Achievement in Corporate Governance a couple of years back in London. Earlier, late Sir Adrian Cadbury was also conferred with Golden Peacock Global Award for Corporate Governance. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Judge King is joining us, as I said, from South Africa right now. He is a living legend and considered to be the father of corporate governance. A great, great honor to have you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Over to you, sir, for the keynote session, which is going to be on corporate governance, moving beyond mere compliance.
Yes. If I go back to the turn into the 21st century, the governance dictate was still based on the primacy of the shareholder. It moved during the 21st century from increasing the wealth of shareholders to a value creation process, from inputs into a company the activities in a company, how it made its product, and the outputs from that company, namely its product and also waste. And these, the product and the other outputs from the activities inside a company, had an impact on three critical pillars for sustainable development, namely the economy, society, and the environment. This started changing corporate thinking. At the same time, an analysis of companies listed on the Bombay Stock Exchange all over the world showed that only about 20% of the makeup of the market cap of companies was reflected as additives in a balance sheet according to financial reporting standards, be they IFRS or FASB in the US. So the corporate thinking changed completely, and corporate governance was seen as a rules-based system of how the company was directed and how it was managed. And people used to mindlessly tick boxes. So we've got a remuneration committee, we've got an audit committee, we've got a nominations committee, etc. We are therefore practicing good governance. Well, this mindless tick box approach was not adding any value. At the same time, because of these changes from increasing the wealth of shareholders rather than making decisions in the long-term health of the company, resulted in the change in corporate reporting. I was chair of the United Nations on corporate governance, and there I learned about sustainability issues. I then became chair of the Global Reporting Initiative, and there I learned that the financial reports and the sustainability reports had to be connected, or as some people call it, the financial and the non-financial. This led to the establishment of the International Integrated Reporting Council, which integrated the resources used by the company, or the capitals as we call it in the IR framework, and the relationships between the company and its stakeholders, because they are integrated. They're not in silos as we were taught. Financial capital separate from human resource separate from natural resources used by the company. No, these things are all integrated. And so the reporting became from inputs to outcomes, because when the product went out into society, it had an impact on those three critical pillars for sustainable development. At the same, that was 2010 to 2013. In 2015, the United Nations issued their Sustainable Development Goals, 16 outcomes-based goals: clean water, an outcome; clean production; clean cities; peace and justice for all, an outcome. The 17th SDG was collaboration. And we've seen the power of collaboration during 2020 with scientists developing in 9 months of vaccination, which usually takes 9 years. So I started asking the question, if reporting is outcomes-based, if our business models embracing the SDGs pertinent to the business of the company, as the conservation of water would be pertinent to the brewer of beer, then shouldn't governance be outcomes-based? And the King Committee asked this question of iconic companies around the world, academics and practitioners. And the conclusion was it should also be outcomes-based. And in consequence, we've had governance move from this mindless checklist approach to a mindful outcomes-based approach to governance. Mindful in the sense that a board is now aware of the 4 outcomes of good governance, which external stakeholders see and rationally draw the conclusion that this company is a responsible corporate citizen and is practicing good governance. What are those 4 outcomes? These are they. Firstly, ethical culture with effective leadership. So I just pause with that one. Intellectual honesty in a director is critical. He has to cross that Rubicon of honesty, leave aside present needs, past experiences, the corporate sins of fear, greed, arrogance, sloth, and cross that Rubicon and actually enter the arena where he's now acting in the best long-term interest of this incapacitated person, the company, that has no mind, no heart, no soul, and no conscience. The mind, heart, soul, and conscience of the company is in the collective mind of the board of directors. Ethical is that integrity. So that's the first outcome. The second outcome is value creation in a sustainable manner. It's no good increasing your bottom line profit, but it's being subsidized by society and the environment. And that was the error of the thesis of Milton Friedman, that the sole purpose of the company was to make profit, because many of the profits, if not all the profits, of companies during the 20th century were subsidized by society and the environment. And with the consequence that the 20th century was a century of unsustainable development, because companies were using natural assets faster than nature was regenerating them. The third thing is adequate and efficient internal controls. Company secretary functions, risk compliance, internal audit. In automotive terms, I describe the adequacy and effectiveness of internal controls as the oil that runs the engine which makes the product inside the company. If you don't have the oil, the engine won't run smoothly. And these internal controls must be adequate and effective in that sense. And finally, there is legitimacy of operations, where the community in which the company operates has trust and confidence in that company. As soon as that trust and confidence breaks down, the company loses reputation, and it loses one of its major assets in the what's known today as the ESG space, environmental, social, and governance space. So in short, governance has changed completely. It's now mindful. When a board is making a business judgment call, it should also check what impact is it going to have on those 4 or one of those 4 outcomes, which rational external stakeholders will look at a company and see if they're achieving it, that it's practicing quality governance. So the board on the other side should be mindful in making business judgment calls that they're not adversely impacting on one of those 4 outcomes. So governance is not what it used to be. And the IOS, International Organization of Standards on Corporate Governance, in the next few months is issuing their revised standards. And they very much have relied on the final King report, which advocates this mindful, outcomes-based approach to governance, which fits in with the narrative of corporate reporting, which has become outcomes-based, and the Sustainable Development Goals in order to make our planet habitable, which are all outcomes-based. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Professor Judge King, for that address. While you were talking, we've received a couple of relevant questions from our members. May I put them across to you to answer them?
Please.
Yeah. So there's a question that's come in which says that with change in the board dynamics, can boards rely on existing mechanism of corporate governance, or is there a need for change?
Well, you still have the mechanisms of nominations committee, remuneration committees, audit committees, etc. But these are aids to help you in that change of mindset. I mean, the nominations committee will check the integrity and the skill of someone who's nominated as a director. And then, of course, the shareholders have to, in general meeting, appoint that director. So, yes, you can still use those mechanisms, but it's got to be with a changed mindset that you're trying to achieve this outcomes-based approach in governance, and not just merely a mindless tick box approach, ticking those mechanisms that you have got those mechanisms, therefore you practice in quality governance. That does not follow.
That's very sufficiently answered. Thank you so much. And there's another question that's come in that asks that GRI has recently issued universal standards for sustainability reporting. How is that going to impact disclosure requirements of companies?
Yes, well, that's a complicated question, and you're going to get a complicated answer. At the moment, there's the concept of double materiality in the world. In the first decade of the 21st century, and I speak with knowledge as I was the chair of the GRI, sustainability looked at the impacts which the company's activities and its product was having on the three critical pillars identified by Brundtland and the Brundtland Commission set up by the United Nations between 1983 and 1987. And those impacts had outcomes. In the start of the second decade of the 21st century, there were, or just before the start, between 2008 and 2010, there were two significant events which started making thought leaders have a re-look at sustainability issues. And these were the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the GFC, the global financial crisis. These two events had huge impacts on limited liability companies, which is the main medium through which business is conducted in the developed and developing world. So those events had a huge impact on the financial condition of companies, its balance sheet, on the operating performance of companies, its income statement and cash flows, on the risk profile of companies, its cost of capital. And so we started realizing that sustainability, like a coin, had two sides. There was the impacts of the activities of the company and its product on those three critical pillars, but those three pillars were in turn having an impact on the limited liability company. So economically, I've given you two examples. Socially, the coronavirus pandemic, and environmentally, climate change. These are having huge impacts on companies. And so in front of the words value creation was added the word enterprise, which if you look up any dictionary or Wikipedia, you see it means business firm. The value added to the business firm, the value of the business firm as a whole. So there is a huge debate at the moment. The IFRS has increased its constitution to not only do financial reporting standards, but also sustainability reporting standards. And by November this year, hopefully, they're going to announce in Glasgow at the COP meeting on climate change, the establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board with global baseline standards of reporting. But the focus of those standards will be on enterprise value creation standards. And the question is being asked by some commentators, is that truly sustainability standards? And the task teams use the word, it's a new word, interoperability. Well, if the host and other people online and I are directors of a company, and there are activities which are having an impact on value, then we should still disclose it in our report, but it won't follow the ISSB standards, which will be focused on enterprise value, the balance sheet, the operating performance, and the cost of capital. So there is double materiality now on sustainability issues. So the short answer to your question is that there's also fragmentation now in what is or what is not good sustainability thinking and reporting. In the EU, they've issued corporate sustainability reporting directives, which embrace this double materiality concept. The impacts of the company on the 3 pillars, and the 3 pillars' impact on the company. And they're going to mandate it for the 27 states in the EU. So already the International Sustainability Standards Board will have 27 of the most important countries, 27 of the most important countries in the world, France, Germany, etc., following a standard on sustainability reporting which will be different from the ISSB. And what the task teams are trying to do, as I'm speaking to you, is to try and align these standards. So we actually arrive at what these task teams are endeavoring to do, a convergence of these so that we can have one standard of sustainability reporting around the world. And at the same time, there's having a relook at financial reporting standards. Basically, we've got 2 standards in the world. We've got IFRS and FASB. And the world through the net has become one place. And the end game has to be a global, comprehensive corporate reporting system. And whether we will achieve it in the next 5-10 years or not, I don't know. All I can tell you at the moment, there is fragmentation and a lot of discussion. So I've given a murky water answer to the questioner, but I've given the facts, and they are unfortunately up in the air. And all I can tell you that global bodies such as IOSCO, SEC, the IFRS, the Value Reporting Foundation, of which I'm Chair Emeritus, which was a merger of SASB, Sustainability Accountancy Standards Board, and the IIRC, are all in these discussions, the outcome of which I do not know.
Thank you so much for detailing out the answer to that complex question, Professor Judge King. And once again, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for asking me.
Thank you, sir. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next distinguished speaker for this keynote session. That's Mr. William Brooks, FCA President, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales, that is ICAEW UK, a professional membership organization that promotes, develops and supports chartered accountants. Currently, they have over 1,89,000 members and students in 147 countries. Talking about Mr. Brooks, he's a business leader specializing in planning in commercial and financial strategy and in practical governance, with board-level experience gained over more than 30 years. A graduate in economics with a strong interest in the development of business models and strategies, he's an experienced director and advisor in a broad range of industries, offering fresh ideas, wisdom, and external experience. He's been involved with ICAEW since 2000 and has served as an examiner for the advanced case study. And as a member of the disciplinary committee, he was elected to ICAEW Council in 2011 and to the board in 2016. He serves as ICAEW President from June 2021. And let me not forget to mention that IOD India actually enjoys an MOU with ICAEW for working together and promoting good corporate governance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's extend a warm welcome to Mr. Brooks.
Good. Thank you very much, Ritika. Can I say that that profile was amazingly accurate. I do actually, I don't know where you got it all from, but it's pretty good. I do actually serve on quite a lot of boards, and I'm different in certain respects to a lot of previous presidents. It is 17 years since we have had a president of the Institute who isn't a partner in an accounting firm. I'm actually a business member, and so most of my work is board work. And what I want to talk about today is really some of the practicalities about governance. I have to say, I don't know if Professor King could see, but I was nodding while he was saying many of the things he was saying, because one of the points I've got in my notes here is exactly the one he began with, that for many years, governance has been seen as a tick box exercise. And it is the change away from that which is having a very considerable impact on the ground. Now, for a long time, governance in UK business, and I'm going to give you a bit of a UK a viewpoint here, which I hope might help members of the conference. It's been growing, and good governance is now seen as essential, not only to the success of an organisation, but also to how it's regarded. There are, I think, in some sectors, I'll give you an example: charities, banks, public bodies of various sorts, particularly where public support is and confidence is very important, and good and effective governance is seen as a vital building block in that, and therefore a vital building block for success. Governance is also helpful because of its value in establishing and maintaining good culture and good ethics, and in promoting diversity. And I want to see a little bit about these things, not too much, but enough. Recent experience has shown that often if something happens that gives a poor impression of an organization, a deficiency in culture is to blame. It causes poor behaviors in front of stakeholders and poor behaviors in front of third parties. And this is, generally speaking, obviously unwelcome. Diversity is a more challenging matter. As many of you will know if you do business in the United Kingdom, the UK is now a highly diverse society. I don't simply refer here to racial diversity, but also to other characteristics: disability, age, gender, personal background, geographical location, business background, and so on. Diversity is seen as what we might call a good thing, but it is common to find that not everybody knows why. And it's quite funny, but actually there is more lip service to the importance of diversity than there is understanding of its purpose. Speaking from our standpoint, we do not, ICAW does not promote diversity simply in order to appear politically correct or to appease certain pressure groups or political parties. We do so because experience is showing and evidence is mounting that by including individuals who have a range of backgrounds along the lines I just discussed, this can result in a very strong improvement in the quality of decisions. I see this regularly in the various boards that I'm involved with, and indeed at ICAW, where I chair the board. This happens, I think, because each board or committee that we have in a structure will be able to draw on a variety of viewpoints and a variety of experience. And that is the value of it. I think it's worth saying a few words about the application of governance, which I hope delegates will appreciate. As Professor King said, 10 years ago and more, governance we see very much in the light of compliance with rules, an emphasis upon process rather than outcome. And now that has very much changed. Today, we're beginning to see governance situations and the establishment of good governance in a much more creative light. My own experience, both as not only as chair of the board at ICAW, but also with the other companies of various sizes with which I'm involved, is that our committees and other bodies, as well as the rules within which they operate, increasingly have real and valuable outcomes. And the results of our deliberations are generating can be of enormous organizational benefit. And at this point, I want to draw attention to a concept which you may have heard, you may not, but one which I would commend strongly to you. And that is the concept of creative governance. Creative governance. Governance with a purpose that is beyond mere compliance with rules or compliance with external regulations. To achieve benefits like that, we must get certain things right. First of all, we do need the right bodies. Board, audit committee, remuneration committee, risk appointments or nominations committee, and so on. This is perhaps where guidance and codes have great value because they provide some benchmarking. And it doesn't necessarily follow, of course, that every organization has to have every committee. We're not in that business. But what is established needs to reflect the circumstances. There are some governance structures which are historical. They've come forward. I have to say that ICAW's is like that. It has a very large governing council, which is not a practical place to deal with any of these matters. And so we structure our committees in a manner that aids council and reduces the amount of detail with which it deals. Everybody in a given structure needs to have the right terms of reference. Each committee has to have that, and those terms of reference need to interlock with one another between one body and another. That said, each body, each committee needs the right leadership, a good chair, and chairing skills are becoming increasingly hard to find because of the number of people who are needed to do this type of work. Each body, of course, then needs, by reference to its terms of reference, the right membership, relevant knowledge, relevant talent, relevant potential is sometimes more important than simply seniority. It is essential to get a group of people that genuinely have a diversity of ideas. And that said, each body then needs the right information, the right papers, clarity of purpose in each matter, and so on. And that means that it also needs a good and well-coordinated relationship with the others. And certainly that is a source of failure if it's not right, because it can cause turf wars between one body and another. At ICAW, we've noticed a very strong growth in the degree of enthusiasm and interest on the part of our members in this kind of matter. Governance and knowledge, the knowledge of it is now seen as essential to business, and it's essential to organizational leadership, and it's central, of course, to board work, which is what our members specialize in to the extent that they're not in public practice. We now have a governance community. It's a sort of an electronic relationship between those members who are interested. It's an electronic association of members interested in this field that now runs to many thousands of our members. Is one of our biggest groups, and we are through that and in parallel with it doing a great deal of thought leadership and creation of documents and reports and thinking, which is both for the benefits of members and it's available externally to the public. If you look at our website, icaw.com, there is a lot of material in there which demonstrates the rapidity within which this field is this field is developing. Member appetite, public appetite for this topic is very substantial, and we welcome that. I think the point I want to get across really is that this, as a topic, governance should be embraced. The practicalities of good governance can be challenging, but the prizes that are to be won from it are very significant. Ultimately, greater awareness and control of risk, better succession planning, better forecasting, better financial forecasting, measurement and control, and also better non-financial forecasting, measurement and control, which is where the future of accounting is. I'd like, Ritika, if I may, before I finish, just to build a little on what Professor King said concerning the previous question about financial reporting, but basically a better reputation for the organization, and above all, real competitive advantage, because the organizations that make decisions and the processes by which those decisions are made are, if they're well defined and excuse me, and well conducted, ultimately that organization will be more professionally run and more creatively run. And of course, that is what matters. Now, I hope that what I've had to say is of interest to delegates. I do look forward to taking questions. Perhaps, Ritika, we could return back to the question that was put to Professor King about reporting, because our view is that the amount of non-financial reporting and the amount of non-financial standards is going to grow very rapidly, and this is an absolutely essential building block if organizations and world business is going to meet the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Without measurement, we can neither measure our progress, nor can we plan future. We absolutely have to have this stuff. And that means there's going to be far more in the way of non-financial standards and non-financial processes and non-financial products in accountancy and in finance than we have seen hitherto. It is a vital area, and we're spending a lot of resources on it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brooks, for sparing your valuable time. If you could spare a little more, I have a very relevant question to put across, which has come from the audience, which of course is pertaining to this current time of pandemic that we are going through. What's been the biggest issue faced in relation to maintaining good corporate governance? And then what lessons can the UK share in its experience with our boardroom community here in India and other countries, people joining in from all over?
Well, I think there has been a change in the way this is done, and the fact that I have not had to come to Delhi in order to see you is the evidence of that. I mean, I'm very sorry not to be in Delhi, obviously, but the fact that we have this terrific technology has improved agility in corporate decision making, agility in governance. It is now feasible, if we have a particular issue that we want to talk about in a particular corporate organization. For example, considering how the future remuneration of the CEO should be structured, which in one of my organizations, not ICAW, but another, we had a problem. It was possible to convene the remuneration committee, and because just literally to consider that matter for half an hour, and the quality of advice that was received from the committee. They were being asked to endorse anything. They simply were asked to consider the problem. Now, that kind of process used to be much more pedestrian. Oh, we'd have a month's notice. We don't need to do that anymore. And I think if the one thing that's been achieved is the advance of this technology and improved agility. Second point is that we found it very, very valuable. And the members, I hope, have found it valuable, because we have been able to communicate with far more associated parties, not just members, but also other stakeholders. In many respects, the experience during the pandemic has been the making of bodies like ours, because we can now do things and reach people that we couldn't before. And this is, in many respects, is something of a bonus. There's no question that the job of accountants, and chartered accountants in particular, has been very important from the point of view of helping businesses, to helping entrepreneurs and business leaders to save their organizations. I have to say, as non-executive director in some other organizations, I've certainly felt that in many respects we've earned our corn. We have earned our corn because we have been able to assist managements when often they've never seen a situation like this in their whole business careers. I'm very proud to have done what I've done with us in that field, and I know many of my colleagues are as well. So a lot of change, Tika, yes, a lot of change.
Thank you so much for elaborating on that so nicely. Thank you so much, Mr. Brooks, for making our time once again. And technologies do help, but we hope to see you in person sometime very, very soon. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. So that was Mr. Brooks. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming and extending a very warm welcome to our next distinguished speaker of the keynote session, CS Mr. Nagendra D. Rao, President, the Institute of Company Secretary of India. Ladies and gentlemen, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India is also our supporting partner for this year's Directors Conclave. All CS professionals shall be getting 8 CPE hours. For the keynote address, we have with us CS Mr. Rao, who's a law graduate from University of Mumbai, has over 15 years of experience in corporate sector. He specializes in corporate and security laws, capital market transactions, business planning, mergers and acquisitions, financial restructuring, strategic investment, funds planning and arrangement, etc. He's been associated with ICSI for several years now. And at this point, I also must mention that IOD India has also enjoyed an MOU with ICSI for working together and promoting good governance. Thank you so much for being a supporting partner. Over to you, Mr. Ron.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Thank you once again. Good afternoon to each and everyone present through virtually. Honorable panelist of the session, Professor Judge Marvin E. King, Mr. William Brooks, and respected President of the IOD, and all the dear members of the IOD, and all my dear fellow professional members. It gives me immense pleasure and delight to be amongst many of the most learned minds who have shaped the corporate culture of this nation and beyond, to share with you and deliberate upon a topic which I, as a governance professional, as well as in my capacity as the President of the ICSI of India, which holds close to my heart. Friends, having held on to the baton as an ICSI of corporate governance for the past 5 decades and pursuing all of our initiatives and actions with the intent of realizing our vision to be a global leader in the promoting good corporate governance, we at ICSI have been privy to all facets of corporate governance up and close, from Companies Act 1956 to the Companies Act of 2013, from the clause 49 of the listing agreement to the Securities Exchange Board of India, SEBI LODR regulations, and from the standard laws to the secretarial standards and auditing standards. All of this journey have taken place and have defined and designated roles in framing, restructuring, focusing, and strengthening the governance framework, encashing the Indian ink. And it is this proximity of ours that we have been witness to the altering subtleties and dynamics of the corporate governance scenario of India, and play our important pivotal role in taking these journeys along. Friends, it is only the day before yesterday that the ICSI celebrated its 53rd Foundation Day in the benign presence of Srimati Nirmala Sitharamanji, the Honorable Union Minister for Finance and Corporate Affairs, Government of India. It is during her address that she made aptly clear as to the thought and intent of the Government of India as well as the regulatory authorities to not only promote the cause of ease of doing business, but also ease of compliance as well. Which brings to me the theme for today's discussion, corporate governance moving beyond mere compliance. When we talk of Atmanirbhar Bharat, we think of a self-reliant nation. And if the dream and vision of the Honorable Prime Minister is to be achieved, the route to be taken is one of their entrepreneurship and innovation. The 20 lakh crore package, which rests on the 5 pillars of leaping economy, strong infrastructure, technology-driven system, vibrant demography, and an equally strong chain of supply and demand, utilized to its full capacity, focuses on various sectors. So, when we think of corporate governance, I believe the need of the hour and the moment is not just corporate governance, but governance of all the business enterprises, including the small and medium enterprises, and not to mention the startups on the list. The deliberation of today's step from the challenging post and opportunities available in the post-pandemic era. While up till now, corporate governance and compliance have been used interchangeably, the past 2 years have changed the dynamics immensely. The pandemic has, while leapfrogging innovation and fast-tracking connectivity, enabled learning and working from home, yet the same technology has brought with us its own set of issues. To refocus on corporate governance is one key element in improving economic efficiency and growth, as well as enhancing investors' confidence. Needless to say, effective corporate governance system within an individual company and across an economy as a whole helps providing a high degree of confidence that is necessary for proper functioning of a market economy. And the need for the same has been rendered imperative now more than ever. The degree to which corporations are wedded to the basic principles of good corporate governance has become an increasingly important factor for investment decisions. The very reason as to why corporate governance is shifting from mere obligation and compliance with laws and listing standards to a business imperative for many firms is because it is being viewed as a differentiator among firms, providing a suitable competitive advantage. From being considered as an abstract goal, the new age corporate governance is being looked upon as a factor existing to serve corporate purposes by providing a structure with which the stockholders, the directors, and the management can pursue most effectively the objectives of the corporation, holding the balance between the economic and social goals and between the individuals and the communal goals. Deliberating upon the corporate governance as a business imperative for competitive advantage, a reasonable question to ask is, what does a company stand to gain through enhanced level of corporate governance, or what does a company stands to gain through corporate governance beyond compliance? The answer to the same lies in the fact that the corporate governance is a key driver of a sustainable corporate growth and long-term value creation. Corporate growth structure or corporate governance structure is a core feature of an effective framework for competition, not only at the micro level of a companies, countries and economies are seeing better corporate governance practices as a way of improving economic dynamism and thus enhancing overall economic performance. To remain competitive in a changing world, corporations must innovate and adapt their corporate governance practices so that they can meet new demands and grasp new opportunities. The modern day investors are increasingly willing to pay a premium for a well-governed companies that adhere to good board practices, provide for information, disclosure, and financial transparency, respect the right of the shareholders, and go beyond the call of the duty, the word of law, and extend better access of information to their stakeholders. Quoting the finance minister once again, compliance related issues have been the main cause for the companies to fail to live up to the expectations of their investors. Most often, big scandals have come out for want of mature compliance. While the government is focusing on bringing about simplicity into the system by removing the archaic law, bringing in amendments that can further simplify the system and reduce penal provisions, professionals, company secretaries, and boards have a bigger task at hand. The intent is not to merely with a few sections here and few regulations there, but what is needed is a holistic approach, an inclusive approach, one where the informational needs of all the stakeholders are well taken care of, and one where the burden of compliance is not felt anymore. Given the voluminity of the task at hand, the same does not requisite the focus of a manager or a CEO or a board alone, but the combined efforts of professionals, management at all levels, and so on and so forth. And bring to me to say that together we can, together we will. Thank you. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roy, for such insightful address. But before I put forth the question that has come from the audience for you, we would like to congratulate ICSI for the 53rd Foundation Day and extend our greetings and best wishes on behalf of the entire IOD family.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the question that our audience member has sent us is that now in the highly competitive global economy, what additional major roles the company secretaries can play, moving beyond the usual compliance and making the boards more future ready with that?
The role of a company secretary has now grown beyond leaps and bounds and is not restricted only to the compliance of law. More so, he has to be like a walk the talk, where he has to guide, advise the board in terms of a governance professional, what not only the following the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law. The company secretary being knowing various facets of not only the law, accounting, but almost all the facets of the functioning of a company. He can be a right advisor or a right mentor to the board, as well as especially to the independent directors, to know and to tell them what is good and what is bad for the company, by virtue of which you will find that he can not only pressed upon update to the board of directors what are the new changes in not only the law, but the way in which the functioning can be in a better way to follow within the four corners of the law. As we rightly say always, Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara, which is the motto of our institute. In the similar way, speak the truth and abide by the law. In other words, the board should be informed or well informed what is right and what is wrong and advise accordingly.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roy, for sparing a valuable time in sharing those deep insights. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
And I will request that we move forward. Now we're moving forward to our next distinguished speaker for the keynote address, and that's Mr. Jeff Jackson, who's the Director of Asia Research, Glass Lewis, Australia. He's joining us from Australia right now. He holds a master's degree in international relations and diplomacy from the Australian National University and oversees the proxy research team that covers 13 Asian capital markets split across Greater China, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. If some of you may not know, then Glass Lewis is an American proxy advisory services company that provides governance services that support engagement amongst institutional investors, corporations through its research, proxy vote management, and technology platforms. Collectively, the group analyzes over 4,000 companies annually. A very, very warm welcome to you, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you very much. Before I get started, let me just set up my PowerPoint, since I'm going to do a presentation. Let's see, let me make sure that's, let's see, sorry, one second. Let's see, I need to be able to share my screen here. Sorry, could I just need a little help with sharing my screen. Are you guys able to see my screen by chance?
I'm sure the tech team can help you with this. Can the tech team please help?
If not, then I can forego that PowerPoint and just present as is.
Ravi, if you're there, can you please just step in and see if we can have the contents up there?
Let's see.
Good, sir? Is that good?
Yep, that should be good. Okay.
Then we can see your content now.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, so first and foremost, I'd like to thank the Institute of Directors for inviting Glass Lewis to be a part of today's and tomorrow's conclave, for that matter. In terms of my presentation, before I really get started, thought I'd introduce who we are in terms of Glass Lewis. So for Glass Lewis, next slide. Let's see, next slide. So in terms of Glass Lewis, in terms of our customer base, we do have the majority of the world's largest pension funds, mutual funds, and asset managers who collectively own 40 trillion in assets as our clients. For us, our goal is to enable our institutional investors and publicly listed companies to make sustainable decisions based on research and data. As was noted, we do have a wide variety of markets that we cover. In terms of research teams, we do have teams that are located in the United States, Europe, and the Asia Pacific, giving us a global reach with local perspective on important governance issues. Glass Lewis as a whole covers over 30,000 shareholder meetings annually. For India, we cover over 1,000 shareholder meetings annually in terms of this particular market. As for our offerings, they include our proxy paper research reports, as well as our Viewpoint proxy voting platform and extensive thought leadership, which includes responses to public consultations in markets, including India, where I think we've submitted 3 or 4 this year. For public companies, our governance hub provides easy access to tools and resources, including Glass Lewis research and thought leadership, to enable companies to optimize their corporate governance programs and ESG strategies. Next slide, please. So today, I will be talking about moving beyond compliance and what exactly are boards to do. Next slide. So in looking at India's corporate governance practices, we find that India is very good at prescribing compliance. For a country like India, the compliance approach may be a superior approach compared to that of comply or explain, as we see in other Asian markets. In this case, compliance sets the baseline practices and expectations toward corporate governance. In the past decade, compliance has grown through new laws, regulations, rules, while such entities such as the Reserve Bank of India have taken a far more active approach in overseeing and influence the way banks practice corporate governance. On the whole, I would say this has been actually quite good for India. While compliance is seen as being good, can boards do more to lift Indian corporate governance, especially when India is actively attracting increased foreign investment? Next slide. Compared to its Asia-Pacific peers, India has unfortunately remained largely in the middle of the pack for corporate governance. In its most recent rankings by the Asia Corporate Governance Association, India is actually ranked 7th, a place that's been held for the most part in their last several different corporate governance watch publications. In terms of compliance, overall corporate governance rules are seen as strong. However, is there the true enforcement to back up some rules? We've seen, at least especially in the proxy voting side and shareholder voting side, that public sector undertakings unfortunately fail to meet the same rules and compliance as other listed companies, leading to an unequal playing field which favors government companies. I don't know how, but this is going to have to change into the future. On the flip side, there have been notable changes in the improvement of auditor oversight, yet at the same time, legal remedies for minority shareholders and anti-corruption measures can still be improved. In managing investor relationships, likewise, India has performed well, particularly among its peers. But with increased foreign investment and mandated voting by domestic mutual funds, for example, are boards ready to actually engage and perhaps change their practices based upon the broadened ecosystem of who is involved in terms of shareholder voting and corporate governance? In this area, Indian boards may be tested in how they respond to a broader range of investors. Likewise, India's vibrant press has served as a helpful tool to identify trends in corporate governance, especially at times the failings, which has led to improvements in corporate governance. But what can boards do to improve certain practices aside from mandated compliance? Next slide. This brings up transparency and accountability. Beginning are looking at shareholder meetings, there is room for improvement, beginning with what goes into a notice of meeting. From us on the proxy advisory side, when we're evaluating companies, we find that companies are great at explaining the compliance aspect of the proposal. They have to do this because it is mandated by section this of the Companies Act or the LODR. But what we're finding is that companies tend to not provide as much of the rationale or a really good explanation in the supporting details that might not make it into the notice of meeting, let alone the explanatory notes. Those are kind of the more important elements of where investors are looking for in terms of how they're going to decide. As an example, for executive compensation, improving the details surrounding remuneration may make or break an investor's decision to support a proposal. But as there is more shareholder voting in compensation, the expectation is that India will improve, or Indian companies will improve their disclosure, or shareholders might not be supportive of compensation plans. For instance, we find that there's often very little detail about what performance measurements are being used to determine a bonus or the payment of commission, or how that quantum of pay is actually determined beyond, for instance, allowing a person to receive a maximum amount of money. While promoters may receive commission, there realistically should be more detail about how they receive their percentage of their company's net profits, never mind the fact that they may already be receiving net profits by way of dividends. On equity compensation, and this is an area of increased attention, there's often a great deal of discretion being afforded for boards to set the vesting and the exercise prices, the performance conditions, but there really isn't any indication of how the grants are actually determined. So while some structural elements may be good, the important details of how it's implemented oftentimes go undisclosed and unknown. While COVID may have resulted in company losses, companies still need to provide, for instance, how minimum remuneration will be determined in future years if they seek that at a shareholder meeting, or if remuneration is paid in excess of certain limits, is there an expectation that management should receive all their pay despite losses? These are questions that sometimes go largely unanswered, and we saw a lot of this during the AGM season. Likewise, in 2021, we saw a lot of companies not disclose the ceiling on managerial remuneration per the Companies Act. While companies were also requesting that pay be permitted beyond the ceilings for certain executive directors, if the ceilings themselves are not necessarily disclosed, then how can you reasonably expect shareholders to approve yet understand the proposed pay amounts, and especially if they exceed those ceilings? This is especially the case when we saw a number of companies seek the ability for an executive director to exercise their equity-based compensation that would have been 15% of a company's net profits. This is an area where we found significant amount of rationale lacking to really justify these sorts of proposals themselves. For board disclosure, as has been noted previously, there has been a vast improvement in disclosing biographical details of directors. Yet, when we're looking at boards and the committees, it is really important that the boards actually have members with the suitable skills and background and the appropriate experience to really evaluate what a committee is charged to do. There's greater emphasis now on the risk committee, the audit committee, or even on the remuneration committee. Can directors realistically say they have the background and skills to effectively manage a company's risk profile in this burgeoning age of ESG with greater attention to, for instance, cybersecurity, especially if you don't have directors with a cybersecurity background? While it is required to do, in another area in terms of disclosure, while it is required for Indian companies to disclose the domestic directorships of their board members, we find that there are many directors across India who serve on boards outside of India. Yet those directorships seemingly are not disclosed. As boards become more and more invested in the time it takes to be a director, but also the need to respond to matters that could happen at any time of day now, the question then becomes, how many boards is suitable for a member to be a part of? And for foreign boards outside of India, those should be disclosed to shareholders because it is part of a director's overall time commitment. Lastly, in terms of looking at board disclosure, As April 2022 approaches, we will see significant change for many promoter directors to transition from an executive chair to a non-executive chair role or another similar role on the board. However, when we were looking at the approval of many different executive chairs over the past couple of years, we have not seen any indication about these potential succession planning and how boards will then fill the position of a chair or managing director following a particular change as a result of new regulations. Next slide. Likewise, when it comes to other transactions such as related party transactions, these are relatively new for the market, and there's been a lot of growing pains associated with how companies are disclosing. Yet, what we do find is that there's still a lack of really good disclosure about companies saying, okay, here's the term of the related party transactions. Some of them are for an indefinite period of time. In those instances, it makes us hard for us, whether as proxy advisors or I would imagine shareholders, to really understand what are those transactions and how and whether or not they're actually good for the company. Likewise, there's often lack of disclosure of the terms of the transactions, if they're loans. For instance, is there an interest rate? Is there a time for repayment? And oftentimes it's very limited disclosure about, for instance, the provision of goods and services. Finally, the rationale for related party transactions, we have seen companies simply put that from a compliance standpoint, they're doing this because, well, it's going to exceed 10% of their annual consolidated turnover. That's great, but there may be instances where companies need to actually provide shareholders with the rationale of why is this good for the company and what will it mean long term. We have seen some proposals actually voted down over the past couple of years because of these lack of quality disclosure. For us, I believe that shareholders are likely to continue to challenge boards in the way that they are making their disclosures, and they're not afraid to vote against certain transactions just to make a point. Likewise, for other transactions we've seen across the market, even in this AGM season, for mergers, spin-offs, other types of financial transactions, the referencing of fairness opinions or independent financial advisor reports, yet those are seldom disclosed. In this day and age, shareholders are looking for a broader element of disclosure. If you have those reports and you reference them, it behooves me as to why boards are not actually going that extra step to provide that additional element of transparency. As such, we encourage boards to really look at how they're disclosing those sorts of reports, which is common across other Asian markets. For the future as the business responsibility and sustainability reporting is set to take off over the couple of years, obviously this is going to mark a significant change for Indian companies. While there is no mandated framework in terms of reporting, whether that be TCFD, SASB, etc., we encourage boards to really be transparent in how they are choosing the ESG framework and metric. As has been discussed previously, there is an attempt to try to have a unified approach to ESG reporting, but it may take some time before such unification is really there. As such, when we get to the ESG reporting over the next couple of years, it will be very important for boards to really indicate and identify how, if there are deficiencies in ESG practices, what are they going to do to actually fix those, and the time frame in which they will address those deficiencies. Likewise, for compensation, indicate whether ESG will be used as part of determining executive pay, and if so, how. We see this across other markets globally, where there has been a fundamental tying between ESG performance and director pay. Next slide, please. In terms of governance, you can't have good governance without a strong bench of independent directors. While Indian boards are heavily influenced by the presence of promoters, there seems to be, at least in our review of boards, somewhat of a power dynamic where the promoters may be more powerful than the independent directors. If so, this could undermine the role and purpose of the independent directors. To this end, we in fact rarely ever see any independent vice chairmen or lead or senior independent directors, which are common across many other markets within the Asia Pacific region. They serve as a counterbalance, particularly to major shareholders or controlling shareholders. For boards to be effective, independent directors must be able to demonstrate how they can stand up to management and the promoters. Sadly, what we've seen over the past couple of years is more promoter infighting than anything else, which has kind of led us to believe that there may be some elements of independent directors where they may not have as strong of an element in terms of board cohesion, or at least being able to stand up to the promoters. When determining which independent directors to nominate, the assessment of a director's independence obviously is fundamental. Yet, from a compliance standpoint, boards are very good at meeting specific criteria, whether it be from the Companies Act or the LODR, to determine overall independence. However, when looking beyond just compliance, boards need to look at the broader picture of who a director is. What are their values? Are there any other existing sort of professional relationships or affiliations which could potentially jeopardize their independence, especially if there are business relationships involving other members of a company's group. But more importantly, when we're looking at an independent director, prestige is fantastic in terms of having a great name to add to a board, but it should not detract from an independent director's ability to carry out their fundamental role, especially if they're serving on several boards, given the increasing time demands on directors. India has a great opportunity to revamp its independent directors over the next few years, especially as many directors are going to end their 2 terms of service under the Companies Act in 2024. To that extent, the next few years will be crucial in boards identifying nominees with the right skills and diverse backgrounds to provide a well-rounded board. This in turn can potentially have the opportunity to usher in a whole new generation of independent directors, which can take Indian corporate governance to the next level, as many boards have still relied on what has been basically an older network of long-serving directors. To that extent, where are the boards looking to find their next directors? Are they looking to organizations like the Institute of Directors? Or are they conducting external searches? But more importantly, what are they doing to actually promote the best possible candidates for their board? Next slide. India itself is a destination for investment by foreign institutional investors. With the increase in foreign investment, how are boards meeting the expectation of their shareholders? For boards, there's going to be an increased need to manage expectations and potentially change practices. Yet it is really not clear how many boards are going to do this. Likewise, as mutual funds in India must vote their shares, how are boards looking to engage these investors? And will there be a difference in how boards fundamentally engage with the domestic and the foreign institutional investors as the largest voting blocks? However, in engaging with shareholders and stakeholders alike, are boards communicating their own practices? Do boards and investors really understand each other, and what do they fundamentally want from each other? While returns are great, there may be, for instance, a social license to operate. As investor activism from foreign and even domestic investors will likely continue to rise in the coming years, boards need not be on the back foot, but it is how they engage with other stakeholders which will truly lead to to fostering better relationships and understanding with their investors, which can help to diffuse overall unwanted conflict. Going forward, as we've seen, virtual shareholder meetings are likely here to stay. While the past 2 AGM seasons have opened up virtual meetings, there remains a question of what is transpiring at those meetings. We encourage companies to include as part of their filings, for instance, the questions and answers from shareholders, so they may, so other relevant stakeholders and interested parties may know what has been discussed and how boards may approach difficult questions. Lastly, we encourage issuers to engage with proxy advisors, including us, whether they be foreign or domestic, so we can better understand your practices of what is going on. Speaking for myself, I'm very much looking forward to speaking with more issuers than we have in the past. This is something that I've been trying to do for several years, but now it seems as though more companies are actually interested in engaging. As such, we encourage boards to get to know the proxy advisors. Again, doesn't matter if they're foreign or domestic, to understand how we make our recommendations. Because a lot of what we communicate goes to our clients who are the shareholders of the companies themselves. And that may also serve to better understand what institutional investors, for instance, are looking for from the board versus what companies may be doing. And this is especially the case, as us proxy advisors do have different approaches and policies. Likewise, we view that open and continuing engagement between boards and proxy advisors helps provide a clear understanding of expectations, which can even help boards avoid unwanted surprises at shareholder meetings. Overall, boards have ample opportunities to improve corporate governance in India. While compliance lay the foundation for corporate governance practices, it is up to the boards to decide how they're going to be received by their investors. To that end, we encourage boards to look beyond the basics of compliance and to better understand who is operating within the broader corporate governance ecosphere to understand how they can also improve corporate governance practices within India. With that, I thank you very much. And if I can just actually go to next slide. In terms of just a little more about Glass Lewis, for issuers out there, we are looking forward to engaging with you throughout 2021 and 2022. If you are interested, please look at the Glass Lewis website to better understand how we may engage with you, as well as opportunities to review our research. With that in mind, I greatly appreciate the Institute of Directors for the opportunity to speak today and be amongst this illustrious panel.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jackson. We really appreciate you giving us such deep insights. And also, just a quick check, we'll just spend quick 2 minutes on getting an answer to a very important question that's come in from the audience, which is about, one, shareholder activism. With increasing shareholder activism, boards have been asked to increase the disclosure mechanism beyond financial disclosures. How non-financial disclosures will add value to assess the performance of boards and companies, and also, what are your plans and how are you going to support and work with Indian boards and support them in the governance standards?
Sure, I'll start with the last part of the question and then move backward. So in terms of our ability to work with Indian boards, we are very happy to engage with them. That is something where I think in the past we've been accused of not wanting to engage, which it's actually quite the opposite. I think I've sent out a couple thousand emails over the past couple of years, which the vast majority never responded. So for us, we do make engagements, basically a free service that we are happy to speak with companies. Likewise, we do have the ability to offer companies a program to participate in, which is called our Issuer Data Report, which allows companies to review a draft of our report prior to our final publication. And make make some notations and send it back to us. So in those regards, we're happy to work with issuers on those basis, but also, again, it is trying to understand one another in terms of what is happening on the ground in India. Obviously we have our approach, but also we hear from our clients who are large institutional investors about what they're looking for out of companies themselves. As for disclosures, non-financial disclosures is going to be fundamentally changed by ESG disclosures. As India is embarking on a fundamental shift in overhauling, or I should say evolution of, for instance, ESG reporting, that's something we're going to be watching carefully over the next couple of years. Outside of ESG reporting, we encourage companies to kind of think about who you're actually writing toward. There are a lot of investors who don't necessarily understand India all that well. We hear it actually quite a bit when we have to explain to them what a company is seeking to do. So in terms of your non-financial disclosure, the more that you can make it fundamentally easier to understand, whether it be from a domestic perspective or a foreign perspective, the better it is for everyone else. Likewise, when looking at non-financial disclosure, we want and we encourage companies to give a whole picture of what is going on, whether it be a transaction or, for instance, how the board has functioned. It's great that we can see, for instance, directors have fantastic backgrounds and pedigree, but while disclosure has improved to include board skills matrices, we often find that we're still trying to understand who the directors really are. So again, this is kind of moving beyond just like the box ticking exercise of mere compliance, but providing that holistic picture of who the directors are, what is going on with the company, and how they are looking to, for instance, face the challenges that boards face today.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for sharing your valuable time and also sufficiently answering that question. I hope that answers it for the person who asked it from the audience. Thank you to all the distinguished speakers. And we have some great news to share with you right now, that now we're being joined by Mr. Tarun Kapoor, IAS Secretary, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India. Mr. Kapoor had to join us in the morning, but he had to go in for a sudden meeting with the minister. But we're very, very glad that he's being able to make it to the conclave right now. Mr. Kapoor, a very distinguished civil servant in a 1987 batch, senior IAS officer of Himachal Pradesh cadre. In his more than 3 decades of exemplary service, he has headed many important portfolios in the Himachal Pradesh government and also the central government. We are very privileged to have him with us today to deliver the keynote address. Over to you, Mr. Tarun Kapoor, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. And my good wishes to all of you, all participants. The role of the board is very important. We all understand that. Role of independent directors is also very important. Responsibilities which board has to have on their shoulders based on the provisions in the various acts, plus the requirement of the company. First is that the board members must understand that. Board members must be aware of what their responsibilities are, what their liabilities are, and what is the legal provision. Because sometimes what we've seen is that some of the independent directors or board members are too afraid to take decisions. Now they're too afraid to take these decisions because they're not very clear. They have responsibilities and they have certain obligations, but then it doesn't mean that they can't take decisions or they can't work to take the company forward. The board has several functions. So out of the functions, and then there are the objectives of the company. The company has set some objectives. Companies have to grow. There has to be there is competition, and they have to be part of that competition. They have to increase their market share in certain cases. There is a bottom line to watch out. They have to provide good quality services. And at times they have to take financial decisions which might be also sometimes falling in gray areas, particularly in government companies where there may be some rules which go from the government also. Now, to balance all these, looking at the goals of the company, the business growth of the company, the investments which the company has to make, financial decisions which the company has to take, manpower decisions which the company has to take. Now, all that, now to balance that and also be within rules, also able to take decisions which will not put any of the directors in trouble as far as law is concerned. Now that can happen only if the directors have full knowledge about each of these aspects. So full knowledge about the legal position, full knowledge about the business of the company, and understand the products of the company. For example, just take the case of oil sector companies. So an independent director must know what refining is and what are the margins available in different products, how products are marketed, what is the global scenario, all that. Organizations challenges before the organization, and the directors must also have a good knowledge about borrowings of the company, the financial position of the company, and also the areas where there is a chance that some decisions may go wrong, or the risk areas, and it should be able to weigh the risk and then take a decision which is in the benefit of the company. So while most of the directors come with good knowledge and a good background, sometimes we have directors who are not from that field, like they've not spent their lifetime in that particular field of work or that particular area, and then they have to unlearn and they have to learn, and there is no alternative but to learn the business which that particular company is in. So I will stop here. My good wishes to all the participants, and hope you have good deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tarun Kapoor, for finally making time and sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much. It is really an honor to have you, sir. Thank you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank once again all our distinguished speakers for sparing their precious time and sharing their invaluable thoughts, which I'm sure have enriched all of us listening to them today. I would also like to thank all our guests for joining us today for IOD's 2021 Annual Directors Conclave. We will now recess for lunch and we will resume the keynote session at sharp 3 p.m. India time today. You may remain logged in or you may relog with the same links as have been shared. The link details are available on iodglobal.com. Once again, a big thank you to all our partners for the overwhelming support, because without them, this couldn't have happened. I would like to thank our principal strategic partner, ACCA, the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants, principal partners, ONGC and MIDC, our platinum partner, Delhi Tourism, Bihar Tourism, gold partners, World Gold Council from UK, Cisco, GAIL India Limited, India Tourism Development Corporation Limited, Jharkhand Tourism, Gokul Das Exports Limited, National Handloom Development Corporation Limited, Universal Sompur General Insurance Company Limited, Mazagaon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, and National Small Industries Corporation. Also our silver partners, Gujarat Tourism, Indraprastha Gas Limited, Delhi State Industrial and Infrastructural Development Corporation Limited, Glass Lewis, TriStar Group from UAE, National Payments Corporation of India, Madhya Pradesh Tourism, Indian Oil Corporation Limited, Mineral Exploration Corporation Limited, Chhattisgarh State Industrial Development Corporation, and Andhra Pradesh Tourism Authority. Our associate partners, Dahati Gold Mines Company Limited, Hindustan Copper Limited, NMDC Limited, Barmer Lorry and Company Limited, SMC Group, and Mahanagar Gas Limited. Our knowledge partners, Deloitte and Global Schools Foundation from Singapore. And special thanks to our supporting partner, the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. Thank you all once again for joining us. Stay safe, have a good lunch, and we'll see you back at 3 p.m.